Welcome to episode 5 of season 2 of Whole Lot of Wolves. We're your hosts. I'm Joshua Buckley.
And I'm Paul LePage.
And we're going to jump straight into this week ahead of an away trip to Watford on Saturday. So we're going to go behind enemy lines and learn about the opposition by welcoming Richard Sprague. He has just organized the Houston Hornets supporters group here in our home city of Houston. How's it going, Richard?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having us. Looking forward to it.
You're enjoying life back in the EPL. Got that opening win against the Villa, and then a couple close games. How has your team adjusted to being back in the top flight?
Well, I mean, it's a very different team, to be honest. We were very active in the transfer window. I think we brought in 11 people in total, and it's a very different team that's lining up now than lined up in the championship season. In terms of adjusting, I think everyone's really still meeting, getting to know each other. I think it's going to be a while before this new team beds in.
So you mentioned that squad's had a considerable overhaul, especially since the last time that our two sides met. So who should the Wolves be on the lookout for as far as your key players go, or those who could pose a particular threat as a danger man?
I think in terms of threat and danger, everybody knows that our main man is Ismaila Sarr. I think he's the player that we're most excited about. I think definitely the player that we're most excited to have hung on to during the transfer window. I think a lot of people thought that he would probably go to a team higher up Premier League. It's great to have him with us. He is incredibly fast, very talented. Villa, who you mentioned, we got a good win on the first game of the season, so we're obviously pleased about that. He was instrumental in that game. They sat a little bit high, I think, and he was able to get around the back of them pretty easily, again, just using his pace. He's got a good finish on him too. The other new strikers, Emmanuel Dennis, the Nigerian who's scored already. He looks very lively, as does Ashley Fletcher. Don't know if you'll see Josh King. He's a name that most of your listeners will know. He'll actually start. I'm not sure. I would say probably not. The young striker Cucho Hernandez, who's actually been a Watford player for about 4 years, but he played his first game for us against Villa and scored in his first minute. He looks like a real talent, but we're still learning about him, and they're all learning about each other. There's a lot of excitement up front. Having played a few seasons in the Premier League with Nkapu and Abdoulaye Doucouré anchoring our midfield, with those guys gone, there is a gap there. But Peter Otobo is highly rated. He's come into the side. I think he'll do well. He'll run things well. The Slovakian played very well before he picked up a little knock. So yeah, there's a lot of potential, a lot of could-be's, but the one who really is already, everyone knows how dangerous he is Ismaila Sarr, for sure.
What was it like as a fan when it was announced about Troy Denny leaving to go back to Birmingham City? I mean, that obviously Wolves fans know him. He put the dagger in us in the FA Cup semifinals. But yeah, as a fan, that had to be really tough to watch him go.
All of us have dreaded the day coming when Troy left, but leave you must at some point. And I mean, I'm really pleased with the way that it's turned out. It's been done amicably. Troy's going back to his childhood club, so there's a nice romantic story there for him and for them. We're also not going to be playing him every week. Troy has not been the force in the club that most people think of him as for a while now. He's not been the first choice in the team. He's been on the bench a lot. He's had a couple of little injuries that have actually turned out to be almost positives, that it's given breathing space to the other players to come through into the team. It must be very difficult as a manager to have Troy there in the setup, and if you've decided that he doesn't feature in your plans, going to play him, then that's obviously going to be very difficult. And I think there are managers, and God knows we've had enough of them, there are managers who have struggled with that. Having the man leave the club is a good thing for us. The footballer, the key striker, left us some time ago, realistically. It's a good thing for everyone. It will feel strange, I think, for the actual first time knowing that he's not there, because it has been so very long that he's been the talisman of the club, as they call it. But no, it's been done well. Everyone's happy. Everyone's relieved, I think, that it's gone down the way it has, and everyone wishes him all the very best. And I'll be watching, and I hope he does really well. I do.
So beyond Saturday, what would you view as a successful season for Watford? Is it just a matter of staying up, or do you have bigger expectations?
Let's be realistic. Staying up is the goal. I'm tempted to just say 17th. I'll take 17th right now. I've said it before, but I think it's a subtle difference. But I'd really like to avoid the relegation battle. First 4 years in the Premier League, we managed to do that. Fans of other clubs probably weren't really watching that closely, because who watches us that closely? We'd scored so many points by Christmas, January, in those first 4 years that we really were never in the conversation for relegation. Even, I think the 1 year we actually did end up finishing in 17th place. We lost our last 8 games to do it. So we could never have gone down, no matter how badly it went. So I guess I'd like that. I'd like to not be in the relegation battle. I think there's enough really weak teams in this division. I think the whole bottom half of the table's in trouble, frankly. And I don't include Arsenal in that. And honestly, I don't include you guys in that either. You've conceded 3 goals in 3 games to some pretty heavyweight opposition. You'll be up and out of it in no time. But I think Norwich and Brentford are toast. And I think that there are plenty of other clubs to join them. And we just, like the old adage goes, the hunter's running away from the tiger. We don't have to outrun the tiger. We just have to outrun the guy running next to us. And there's plenty of fodder down there. So at 17th, I'll take right now, but I'd like to do it the non-stressful way. I'd like to be clear of it in time to just enjoy, February onwards, as opposed to the year we went down, when it was just horrendous for that time. But so yeah, modest aspirations. But we've done 5 out of the last 6 years in the Premier League. It's the most successful stint in the club's history, and I'd like to survive. I'd like to throw you, actually, if I may, if you've got a minute, something very interesting that came up when I was just sniffing around Wolves and ours. Are you aware of the head-to-head of Watford Wolves?
I'm sure it's bad. I'm sure it's bad.
No.
You guys always seem to beat us.
No, I'm sure you feel like that. I feel the other way around. But no, here's the truth of it. 35 games, 10 wins for you, 10 wins for us, 15 draws. And also goals scored, 88, 44 each. And if you look at the last 3 years, that's the 3 years after you came up and before we went down. So that's obviously 6 games. 2-1 win for you, 2-0 win for you, 2-1 win for us, 2-0 win for us, and 2-2 draws. So there isn't a goal to pick between us in the entire history of our clubs playing each other since we were, I think, basically founding members of the league in the 1880s. So back to your mentioning the FA Cup, and I get to mention the FA Cup because I flew back to England for it for 24 hours. And it was the most painful 24 hours of my life, as you can imagine. Just all of that, just to land, go to Wembley, go back to the airport and back here just to get drubbed 6-0 by City. But that extra time and that game that we won, those are literally the only goals that separate us, going back as far as you like. So smart money on this weekend would be on a close game.
On a 2-2 draw, 1-1 draw?
On a 2-2 draw, 2-1, 2-0. But it's if there's a third goal scored, I'll be very surprised.
Okay, Paul, we've heard from the opposition. Now it's time to focus on ourselves. What are you thinking shape-wise? Are we probably going with 3-4-3 again, especially since a lot of the guys were out on international break and didn't really have that much practice time with Bruno in the club?
I think so. I think it makes sense based on how it's performed to date against the opposition that we've been up against. It hasn't really hurt us with that setup. Again, it's just having the ball hit the back of the net. And I think it suits us, especially away from home. Again, juggling some air miles that some of the team will have had. I think that will factor into it as well. So I think it makes sense. Players wise, I'd probably be inclined to think that it makes sense for probably Bolly to come back in, knowing that he was on the bench last time around. He's had that period of training, especially with Sice being away and getting caught up in,
Yeah, and for
military coups,
for the people that weren't following that, man, we're just glad Roman Saiz made it back to the country. He was over doing World Cup qualifying, and there was a coup in the country he was in, and they had to sneak him out. What a crazy story.
I fully expected Sice to be like on the front lines with a machine gun or something. Yeah, so.
getting a yellow card for taking out one of the insurrectionists.
Yeah. So I think that'll factor into it. I think we'll see Bolly. I think we'll see Kilman. I'd probably prefer Bolly just based on what Richard was saying about Sar's pace up front, and that's a little worry for us that we are playing that higher line, and Bolly's probably the quickest out of the lot, really. So I think that may factor into it to try and lock Sar down somewhat. And I think we're just on the wait and see as far as Jimenez goes. Now that could be a moving target in terms of whether he starts or whether he's banned or whatever.
Why don't we have an answer to this already? Yeah. It's been a week and a half. You would have thought FIFA or somebody has got to come in and be like, okay, he can play or he can't play. And I think it's especially unfair with the way COVID is right now for him to be banned just because you don't want to send him completely overseas. For those that don't know, Wolves said Jimenez couldn't leave to be a part of Mexico. Not too thrilled with that, with CONCACAF's part of World Cup qualifying going on. So they're filing an appeal. If they win the appeal, then Jimenez has to be treated as though he played in the World Cup qualifiers, which means he has to go through a quarantine period of, it's 5 days, Paul?
Yeah. It's really weird.
Absurd.
And different rules for one, like Everton, and they're Brazilians, and that's all different, and they can play because their game's later or they got a midweek fixture or whatever. But it is just a complete cluster, and no one's got a clue really.
Shoot, two of Villa's Argentinians they got deported.
Yeah.
They got deported. Oh, what a mess. So hopefully he plays. If he doesn't play, do you go with Chan or do you go with Fabio? I would think Fabio, right?
Yeah, I think Fabio gets the nod. No, Chan was on international duty. I don't know how many air miles he had to put in, but I think it makes sense, and for his particular role, that he transitions from the bench. So like for like, no Raul, I think it goes to Fabio.
That's what I think as well. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be same 3-4-3. I wouldn't be surprised to see Den Donker start ahead of Moutinho. I do think you're correct with Bolly and Kilman. The question's going to be Aït-Nouri, I think. Does he get the start over Marsal, or do they just keep Marsal going because he's had a decent enough start?
Yeah, away from home, I'm inclined to go with Marsal, but you factor in the opposition. Is it going to be a tougher test, even though we're away from home, than the three teams that we've come up against already, where you'd think that Marsal was playing because he's more defensively inclined? Does the opposition give Bruno more flexibility that he can give a game to Aït-Nouri and know that there's at least a more attacking threat from that left-hand side that might come in useful? And again, especially away from home. So we'll see.
I just see them treated as though they're playing one of the top 4 teams, just because we don't have any points yet. I don't think we can go in thinking, hey, yeah, let's tinker with the lineup a little bit because it may be a weaker opposition. I think they just need the best 11 out there, assuming fitness. That's why I think Den Donker may start over Moutinho, just because Moutinho's been pretty busy over the break. But okay, so what is your prediction then for the game?
I think what Richard was saying about the head-to-head record is confirmed my suspicions, what I was thinking. And to your point there, that we're 3 games in, we're desperate for a win, and it's been great attacking football and all these expected goals, but we're still at a big fat 0 as far as they're concerned. So given it's pretty tight, we need a win. I'm going for a Wolves away win, 1-0.
You know, what's been my strategy for the last 8 months?
Yeah, stealing a little of your thunder when you say that you're not going to go over a goal until we prove that we can do it. So,
but guess what I'm going to do, Paul?
He's going above. You're going above.
Unleash the Kraken. I think Adama's feeling good. He's about to get a new contract. All right. We know what the team's going to be. Feeling spunky, not going up against all-world defenders. I'm going to say 3-1 Wolves.
Oh, okay.
I know that's completely out of character for me. I think the one comes, so far it seems like Saw has made at least one mistake per game. So I put that in there, but no, I think Wolves score probably. They may not score any in the first half and then score early in the second half like they did against Nottingham Forest. And then I think it just starts piling on. So I'm going to say 3-1 Wolves. Paul, you finally did it. You got everybody super stoked about no stupid questions. And you posted on Twitter. You just happened to post it on the same day that Jeff Shee spoke to Tim Spears of The Athletic. And it got people talking and bringing in the questions. So are you ready for them?
I think so. No stupid questions. It's the part of the show where you, dear listeners, can get in touch with any question when it comes to Wolves, whether you're a legacy fan or a newbie, or you're a tourist. You can ask us in a judgment-free zone, either on Twitter, Facebook, or by emailing hello@wholelotofwolves.com. And I thought tonight it may be a shortened episode. Seems it was just a preview show, so I'll put it out there, and literally it blew up. I think I'm going to have to be question master to you with some of these, Josh, because I picked up a certain theme that I've tried to piece these questions together with. So first up, we've got Wayne McKee on Twitter. He asked, do you think Jeff would have been better not giving that interview to The Athletic today? Judging by the reactions on social media, it seems to have angered the fan base even more. So what do you think of that?
First off, I love Wayne. I talk to Wayne all the time on Twitter, and he called this weeks ago. He was like, "They're not gonna make any signings." Oh, Wayne, calm down. No, they're not gonna make. And he was right. He's like the Twitter Andrew for us. Yeah. So let's go over a couple of the things that Jeff Shee said in here that really got people worked up. He did mention how he's happy with the high intensity style, and then said Willy Bolly and Yerson Mosquera get hamstring injuries. That seems to be what's probably going to happen because of the fact that it's such a high tempo pace now and everything, which then people brought up. If you already know hamstring issues are going to be an issue, why are we only having 3 center midfielders? That seems contradictory. He also tried to say that, no, we didn't wait until the last minute. We had 20 or 30 targets overall, but Bruno didn't like 2/3 of them because he thought that the people that were in the squad were already better than those players. So I think that's good for Bruno. He didn't want people coming into the squad just to have numbers. He wanted somebody that's actually going to be good. But at the same time, you're throwing your coach under the bus. Well, he tried to sign some people, but Bruno didn't want them. So I don't know. I felt that was passing the buck some. Said the chemistry is fine with him and Bruno and everybody, even though Bruno was asking for those signings and didn't get it. This is the quote that really stood out to me. He said, people ask, why did Wolves leave all their targets until the final day? It's not the truth. All the targets on the last day weren't totally ideal targets. We've been working for several months on top targets. I'm sure Boubacar Kamara hears that and is, I'm glad I really didn't leave now because apparently I'm not an ideal target. And hopefully you didn't tick off Renato Sanchez by saying that. I kind of think his is a little different situation.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Liam Keane came out early in the week or after transfer deadline day and detailed what happened with Sanchez. Apparently, the deal was agreed. They were doing the physical via Zoom, and that's where it popped up that, oh, he's actually going to be out for 2 more months. So you're looking at by the time he's able to start practicing again and getting into games, it's mid-December. And so that caused Fosun to balk and try and reduce the fee, understandably. And Lille did not want to do that. Now, we've brought up, hey, let's see if they go after Sanchez again come the January window. But then you're also going to run into there's going to be a lot more competition. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more competition. It's a catch-22. Did we want to be paying for somebody that's hurt and wasn't going to play for a few months, or just to make sure we had that option, or take our chances? I don't really know if there was a right answer. The other big news that Liam Keane had was that Sven Botman wanted to come to Wolves. He was all set. Wolves offered £25 million. Lille didn't back off of 35, and so they didn't work out a deal. Which, how much are we expecting to pay for a top center back? Like, I think 35 even sounds like a pretty good deal with some of those prices for center backs going.
I think to that point where I like the stance that the Wolves take when it's the other way around, that we're adamant on our fees for Neves and Traore, that if we're in that situation and someone tried to undervalue us, we wouldn't accept it. But on the flip side, there's a need, and then there's a really genuine need. And that to me is a genuine need, that if you've been working on those signings up until this last day of the transfer window, what she was saying, if you've got those, you had the targets in mind, we had some like the top tier targets or whatever it was. If they were above 25 to 35 million in status transfer value like Botman was, I'd love to know who they were, because if they were going after that caliber of player, then that in theory puts us in a different stratosphere of player that we're going after. So who knows? I think if you personally, and I don't think we'll never know the inner sanctums of how it works and what they're bidding on and values and everything, but if it got down to the last moments and it was a deal like that, sometimes you've got to take a hickey and go for it. And that seems an obvious one to me, that even if he was third or fourth choice, it's not like a Willian Jose type signing. This kid's going to be a credible centre-back for many years to come. So just take the hit now, make it more of a gamble, with the upside being that he's the next Diaz at Man City, who apparently we were in for previously. So I don't know. I think that this whole situation with the interview and what Wayne's asking about, he was pretty damned if he did and damned if he didn't. That right from the start of the transfer window closing, it was, they've got to come out and give us some justification about what happened. So he comes out and gives a justification of what happens and still gets the criticism and still gets the pelters that way. I think a lot of it is certainly understood. I see it, but then when it goes deeper and there's question marks over their intent and whether they're just milking the club or setting it up just to sell it, I think that's unfair. Personally, it's still, out of going on for 40 years of supporting this club, the best I've ever had, and Fosun are a fundamental part of making that happen. So as far as all that goes, I think a lot of it just is bad timing, where we're bereft of a game, to talk about, some activity on the pitch. We're early into the season and we haven't won yet. It's bad timing, as far as all of that goes. a win on Saturday, it all changes and the mood lifts and it's an air of relief. And if we play well, then people will be fairly positive. But again, damned if you did, damned if you didn't, really.
And I think because everybody circles back to their original comments, oh, we're going to compete for Champions League as soon as we can, blah, blah, blah. I just don't think they truly understood the amount of money that Man City and Man U and Chelsea put in every year with their nearly unlimited funds. And he kept talking about in that article the club being self-sustainable.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to look, they're a very large corporation. They're a very profitable corporation, but it's different type of money than if you're owned by an oil prince.
Yeah, I'd love nothing more than to be a fan of a self-sustaining, highly achieving Premier League team because it's very rare. It really is. I think even out of the top four, the top six, there's vast amount of money involved, and they get pelters for their ownership and status that way. But the closest one I even see a comparable model to, and I think some people have even mentioned that she's called them out, is Spurs, where it's not necessarily backed by an oil prince or a conglomerate or American money. That's still the original ownership. But even you're comparing that to the Wolves, where they've just spent X billion on a brand new state-of-the-art stadium that's fit for EPL and ultimately an NFL franchise that would bring in massive revenue. We're nowhere near that. And I think that factors into it as well, where he seems to be ducking the questions or skirting around the subject of the redevelopment of the ground as well, which I think, to me, it just seems a little like the over promising and under delivering in terms of performance on the pitch. I think they've probably done that with the stadium as well, that they've said that we're not going to move from Molineux, but we'd like to redevelop it. We'd like to make it state of the art. But again, it's dawned on them what a massive infrastructure issue that would be. Again, putting that investment into an existing stadium is going to be crazy. How it's carried out without disrupting, without major disruption of match day revenue is, I don't know. And then even if that results in a study that says that a move away makes complete sense, that would create a whole firestorm of discontent, and rightly so. But what's going to happen? Who knows? What's going on behind the scenes? What have they discovered with all of this? It's not unsettling, but it just shows that times are uncertain with current conditions and everything. And I think we're not going to see anything stable as far as infrastructure and stadium goes till the team's performing and everything that goes with it.
And we always joke about the fact, oh, Jeff Shee must play Football Manager, because it always seemed like he was getting Wonder Kids from that. But honestly, it feels like that's the thinking they came in. They were like, we're going to come in, we're getting this team on the cheap. They really like the brand, which I agree with. And I think they were just like, oh, we can pick and then we're going to sell and make profit and keep and move up quick. I just think they underestimated the daily expenses that they would have to incur and the issues with not everybody wanting to come to Wolverhampton. That it's, when you're talking big business people, sometimes they just look at numbers and don't realize there's people behind the numbers.
And I think that talks to his interview today and question marks on the squad or potential incomings, and potentially why Bruno's been picked out as a coach. That if they're looking at it and he's seeing that they can bring a player in, but it's not going to be necessarily any better than what we've got. Has he been given more of a remit to work with the youth? That he's got that pedigree from Benfica and having that period of time that he's come up through the ranks, and that's been his forte, to work with these young players and nurture them and bring them forwards. And when you put it in those terms, I would probably be in favour of nurturing one of our under 23s and giving him on a spot on the bench rather than spending probably a premium amount of a player who there may not be much difference between a Romain Saiss and whoever it is coming through the under 23s. We don't know. So if that is the case, I'd go for the younger player. But I think it's just the buy and sell mentality of a football manager approach certainly filters into the fan base that they want signings and they want them now.
And I think Kilman's quick development this season, early in the season, probably puts some credence in what you're saying about the youth program, because Kilman's still a very young guy. And if he's able to get this performance, Bruno's able to get this performance out of Kilman, we'll see. Maybe he is confident. He looks at the youth squad and says, I can do something with some of these guys at the U23s. So we had Wayne's question. We also had one from Alex. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah, this is Alex Peticus on Twitter, and he asks, am I nitpicking if I'm bothered about Shi in this same interview, recognising that Bruno's style leaves players like Bolly and Mosquera susceptible to injury, but also not wanting to add numbers to a 20-man squad if they weren't top-tier players? Seems contradictory. I think you just touched this yourself, Josh.
Yeah,
as well,
he's 100% correct on that. With that style, you're going to get more soft tissue injuries. That's to be expected, which really made it absurd that you're relying on one of your three midfielders is the 35-year-old guy who's not a spring chicken. Dendoncker wasn't in his best form. He stays pretty healthy, but they're a Neves injury away from being rut-row. I still think Saiss will probably at some point here in the next couple months be starting at center mid. You've also made it so you're going to be playing starters in the Carabao Cup games.
Yeah.
So, Alex hits it right on the head. Like, it's very contradictory. I definitely agree that some of these guys could get hurt. It's going to happen with that style of play. But if that's the case, you do need sometimes depth is important.
Yeah, centre mid, I think, is highly magnified at the moment, where we talk about the focus in the defensive positions and how that goes. But regardless, we've got numbers there and we've got cover at the moment. It is perfectly down to the fact that in midfield, it's the complete opposite. So, yeah, with you on that one. Stu on Twitter. So this one is for you, Josh, particularly. Did any of the panel know of the Wolves badge before following EPL football? And I think what this stems from is there's not only have we had Jeff Shee's interview today, but previously over the course of the international break and even beyond that, there's a lot of stuff around the Wolves fashion brand and being featured on NBA 22 and
that's huge,
esports.
by the way. Huge.
Yeah, esports in China, which I fully admit and put two hands in the air that I haven't got a clue what's going on, but I imagine it's massive. So I think it does all revolve around the brand. And to me, it's certainly a challenge being overseas, knowing that they've got to balance that global exposure to a rabid local fan base that all of they're concerned 100% with is performance on the pitch and what the result's going to be on Saturday. Brandon, what was your experience like?
I've been pretty open about one of the reasons I was a Wolves fan is I'm playing FIFA and I thought it was I'm like, oh, this badge is pretty cool. Oh, this kit's pretty cool. All right, and then you start following the players and stuff and following the club. And that's when you start developing that connection. But absolutely, I was exposed to it through FIFA. And that's one of the reasons I started getting into it. And that's what they're hoping for. I thought it was very interesting. They said the esports, like, they even have the esports teams now saying Wolves we all the time. That's super smart. Okay, and I think we have legitimate complaints about what they're investing as far as on the team and stuff. But you find different ways to bring in more income. You just build that base, you're going to have more money to be self-sustainable and to spend on players. I think not being able to come out to America and Mexico last summer for preseason slowed things down, because I think I still think among Mexico fans, Wolves are a big deal, and I feel like that was just gonna increase it even further. So hopefully they can do that this next year. But it's a great badge. Honestly, you look at all the other badges, and there may be more finer details in some of them and more tradition or whatnot. Wolves is a very clean, modern, bold logo.
Yeah,
And
it certainly stands out. It doesn't. You can't put it next to another one or overlay it against another one, which sometimes you get, and they look very similar, especially if it's one that's more of a town crest, or like the Albion's badge. Who's going to look at a thistle in a hawthorn bush and go, wow, what a sexy badge, man. I'm going to root for the six-fingered lot from down the road. So it does factor into it. You got that element of the brand in the badge, in the color scheme of the club. They and again, people a lot smarter than us, they invest and look into a lot of stuff like that, like the club's own font, for example, and all of those little intricacies that 99% of the people will never see and never understand. But it's all of that element about the brand. But then there is a fine balance that you could have the best club crest in the world, but if you're kicking around in League One, then who's ever going to see it? So
exactly,
it certainly has to be a perfect storm of quality badge, nice color scheme, like particularly stands out on the TV, or if you're playing FIFA, it stands out. Then it's on the pitch, and it's the likes of Traore that gets you off your couch when you're watching away from the UK. You're on the TV, and he picks up the ball. That's what gets you excited. And if he wasn't there, if Jimenez wasn't there, it still comes down to the players and results on the pitch.
Right.
So
yeah, look at the announcement with the NBA 2K22. The Wolves logo really stands out in there. Now it helps they put it in alphabetical order, and because Wolves is a W, it was at the end, so it's right there standing out in a corner. But it, compared to some of those other, and those are fashion brands, that it really stands out, and it makes people, because it doesn't say Wolves. Oh, what's that? And then you start looking into it. And soccer is very much still a growing sport, especially in this country. And it's little things. Americans are dumb. I'm one of them. Like, oh, it's a cool logo. Okay. That's honestly what a lot of people look for. Oh, they like colors, they like logos, and then they like players they can relate with too, which is why it would be nice if they could get an American player. But it's smart. That's the one part I completely agree with what Fosun is doing, is how they're making the badge into a global icon, or trying to anyways.
So next up, we've got NAG on Twitter, or KingWolf84, and he asks if women's football is still the fastest growing sport in the USA, and noting the comments in Tim Spears' article about expanding into the US market. Should the club be putting more Wolves women content out? And if so, what would you like to see? What's your take on that one, Josh?
So I would like to see the numbers on the women's football as the fastest growing sport. Women's football still isn't, it gets popular around World Cup time, and it's very popular with the US players. Trying to sell an overseas team that doesn't have any recognizable faces is so hard when it comes to women's sports. We see that with the Houston Dash, Paul, and they've got some really good players, and it's just really tough to bring in those fans. You see it with the WNBA as well. Super talented players, but is the market, what's the cap at it?
Yeah.
And the women, hey, they earned the promotion. I think that's awesome. To get more popularity, though, they're going to have to keep moving up.
I don't know a ton of the exposure that the Women's Premier League gets over back in the UK, but it does seem that it's got certainly a lot more traction than when I was there 10 years ago and previous to that, it's become more mainstream on Sky Sports, which is one of the sports channels. If I look on a sports app like BBC or Sky Sports, it's regularly in the headlines there about the women's game, which is great. But again, like to your point, and we're talking about the US model, I don't think the audience wouldn't be there to put a Houston Dash game on prime time on one of our sports channels. It just doesn't.
They can't even get the Dynamo on. They're on Quest out here, which is like basically a local substation.
Yeah, so it I think where we're talking between UK and USA, it's worlds apart, and probably the UK are at the forefront of it in terms of the development of that women's game. So as far as that goes, I think what our club does is good, that they try and put a nice spin on it, that the little things like they have the same video content of the players walking up to the ground, and they include them in goal of the month from the women's games as well. So I think they're doing, from the limited amount that I keep up with, I think they're doing a really good job, and it's good that they're supported in the way that they are.
Yeah, you have to crawl before you can run. And so I think with the women, the focus should be on just building their popularity in the UK right now and getting promoted, keep going up.
Yeah, I think what I particularly like is it seems, just going off social media, that it's very, very family friendly and easily accessible to get to a game, which is great. And Wolves fans that you follow on Twitter or some of the Facebook groups that do go along to the games, and you take the family and take the little ones, and it's a day out and then it's experienced that way. So I think that's great. And if it helps nurture the club, and again, it's not necessarily another revenue stream, it's another developmental opportunity, and I hope they do the best as they possibly can, just as much as I want to see the under 23s win, the under 18s, every Wolves aspect that I want to see do well. And I think that's an important thing about the growth of the club.
And we both have little girls that love soccer. So obviously, yeah, we'd love to see women's soccer become more popular. I know the few Houston Dash games I have gone to, they've been fun. There's just not that crowd support even in this country. So hopefully it is hopefully it continues to grow. And yeah, rooting for the Wolves women. I would just say right now, probably the focus on them building it is just staying in that area in the UK.
Yeah,
To build that fan
one
base.
thing, it's been really good to see that. I really love some of the accounts on Twitter. I think there's a Twitter account that follows like the under 23s or the youth teams. There's a Wolves loan watch, so you can see how the players out on loan are doing. And to kick off this season, the Wolves women have got their own fans podcast, which I think is awesome. That's exactly what you want, because
Absolutely.
just purely on personal terms, I haven't got time to keep up with another avenue. I'd love to, but it's just not where my attention is, and everything factors into lifestyle and all sorts. So if there is that avenue that you want to invest in and you want to go down, and that's what you want to really follow, I think it's brilliant. And we'll certainly be sharing the stuff that podcast does, because it's perfectly designed for that audience. All right, finally, Spartacus Mills, he asks, or she asks, the question that I think has been on the forefront of everyone's mind. Josh, why doesn't glue stick to the inside of its tube?
Magic, right?
What do you think? Is it some hocus pocus in the factory?
Yeah, that's all I could think. Hey, I don't know, a little lubricant. What, you're with car development? Is there any parts in there that would work for that, Paul?
I've got no idea. It's definitely a no stupid question that's going to keep me up late at night thinking about it. So thanks for that, Spartacus.
Brilliant question, by the way. Just brilliant.
So that brings this week's show to an end, listeners. Please continue to do what you can in terms of liking, subscribing, and reviewing the Whole Lot of Wolves podcast on the platform that you find yourself listening to us on. We'll catch you next week to review Watford and preview newcomers Brentford coming to town. So until then, up the Wolves.